Hello, good morning. Or I guess almost afternoon. How are you guys?
Good.
So I'm your volunteer, Bree.
Great.
We are, just a heads up, we're already live streaming. It just automatically does that. So just don't say anything too crazy, but otherwise, hey everybody, if you're on YouTube. Are we waiting for anyone else before I start my little spiel for the beginning? Okay.
Yeah, so Lauren, who is also part of this presentation, is joining, and then she is going to share the presentation for us.
So she'll be like advancing it.
Beautiful. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's you and then Lauren who will be joining us. So I just made you guys co-hosts as well, in case anything happens to my connection and I drop off, it won't end everything. So already have you guys on there. And so she'll be doing the presentation. Are you guys doing any video?
Yes.
Okay. Will she be the one doing the video?
Yep. Lauren's driving that.
Beautiful. So when Lauren gets on,
I'm on.
Oh, Lauren's here. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. So let me make you co-host.
Okay.
All right, there we go. And I would love it if you could practice sharing your slides and then also sharing video, and make sure when you share video, when you go to share screen on the bottom, you click
I got it.
Share sound and optimize. Okay, awesome.
Yep, I totally got it. Let me go right to a video and it's me. But so let's see. Okay.
Hey friends, Lauren Hebert here.
Perfect. We can hear
I'm
it.
going to help you understand.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
All right, wonderful.
And then
So when we get going here, I'll open up the webinar about 1 minute before 12 o'clock. And then right at 12 o'clock, we have a 3.5-minute video that I'll share for Denver Startup Week. It includes 3 segments, kind of an introduction about all of our sponsors. Then it'll include like a little ad from one of our sponsors. And then our track chair, who will be sharing our land acknowledgement and our DEI statement. Once those are done, it will automatically, Lauren, you can just go ahead right when that video is done. I will stop sharing my screen and it goes right over to you and you can start sharing. I won't do an introduction or anything. I'll just mute, my camera's off.
Awesome.
Beautiful. And then as far as I'm staying on for the whole session, so I can monitor the chat for any technical issues. You guys can also shoot me a direct message in the chat if you're experiencing any technical issues. I will also monitor to make sure that folks are complying with our code of conduct. If anyone's being disruptive, I will handle that. Don't even worry about having to respond. We haven't had to deal with that yet. So, but just wanted to let you know just in case.
Cool.
Any questions for me? Any concerns, thoughts?
Did we ask what captioning?
No, not yet.
Are we able to set live captions?
Yes, and I will set that up right now.
Thank you.
All right,
And then
beautiful.
we'll be able to see the if there's Q&A or the chat.
Yep, we've got both of those on the bottom. Do you have one person in particular who is going to monitor the chat and the Q&A?
I'll keep an eye on chat.
Yeah, this is very much a presentation, and then if there are questions, then we will take them and
Awesome.
what happens.
Cool.
If I see anything particularly juicy though, I'll keep an eye on it and make sure we answer the question. Guys, if anything happens on the tech side, slide wise or whatever, just keep talking because you guys make perfect sense even without the slides. So don't panic, just keep going. It won't happen, but just in case.
Now that you just said it.
Yeah. Hey, you always got to go with the just in case scenario, and then it won't happen.
It won't happen.
If you don't say it, then it will. All right.
And if that happens,
Good.
if anything happens, you guys acknowledge it, be like, whoops, we lost our slide, and then just keep going. If you guys trip up or whatever, do not apologize for yourself.
Yeah.
Don't say sorry. Just like take a breath and keep going. But
Yep.
like if something really weird happens, like, you know, you can be like, oh, technical glitch, like whatever. But yeah, don't apologize.
So Lauren's basically our coach.
I'm loving this dynamic. I wish I could have a Lauren for every single meeting and presentation I was on.
I know. I feel like a newscaster that's just reading off a teleprompter that like Lauren created. So.
No, oh my God, nonsense. Well, I wish someone was there to like tell me too, because I do this all the time, but like sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, you just forget. You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna mute myself and be quiet until we start.
Okay, awesome. And then I'm going to do the same, and I'll just give you guys a heads up when I'm about to open the room so that you're ready and prepared. I will have my screen shared for that video. And then once it gets to those 3 minutes, it's all you guys. So
Awesome.
again, any concerns, just say, oh, hey, Bree, and I'm happy to help.
Well,
all right.
Thank you.
Have fun.
I know, because it's like the nerves hit and then you get.
I muted you guys, so don't forget to unmute. You're going to be fabulous, Erika.
All right, ladies, I'm going to open up the webinar in just a moment, and I will start the video right at 12 o'clock, and you guys are going to be fabulous. Can't wait to watch.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yep.
Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Tammy Dorr, President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership and co-chair of Denver Startup Week. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup Week. DSW has been the catalyst for lots of change over the past decade. And this week, we're coming together to celebrate the past and dream big for the future. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our 2021 sponsors. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe, Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork. And our track sponsors who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible, our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, our designer track sponsor, Battery 621, and the Public Works, people track sponsor, Exactly, and spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement to the week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage, Path, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors, all listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our hybrid Denver Startup Week. And don't forget, use the hashtag DenStartupWeek to share your experiences and moments of inspiration on social media. Have a great week.
Hello, I'm Sal Gentili, CEO of Friday Health Plans, and we're proud to sponsor the growth track this year at Denver Startup Week. We're a company that just entered a rapid growth phase, so we felt it was particularly appropriate. When my business partner and I started Friday Health Plans 5 years ago, we knew we wanted to create a company that catered to people who bought their own health insurance. The Affordable Care Act was just getting going, and we saw an opportunity to serve a brand new market of health insurance consumers. Independent consultants, startup groups, gig workers, service industry workers, designers, creators, and other independent professionals, like many of you here today. We knew that if we built a health plan that was simple to buy, easy to use, had great customer service, and most of all was affordable, we could compete against the big insurance plans who only focus on serving big companies. After spending 5 years getting into the Colorado market and completing a successful proof of concept, we successfully closed a $50 million round of growth funding earlier this year. We're now about to expand to 3 additional states later this year, hire more than 400 employees to support our growth, and eventually be in more than 10 states by 2025. I wish each of you good luck in your startup and growth pursuits. And as you think about your upcoming health insurance needs, I hope you consider fellow growing startup Friday Health Plans. Open enrollment starts November 1st. Check us out at fridayhealthplans.com.
Hello everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Jake Cohen, the Growth Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow. Regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, or sexual orientation. A special thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep Denver Startup Week free and accessible for all. Thank you for joining us and have a great week.
All right, I think we're ready to
We're
get
ready to
started.
go. Welcome, everyone. My name is Erika Ryder. I am the founder of Hope Tank. I am a social worker turned entrepreneur, and I started my very expensive, very stressful proof of concept business for good with a brick and mortar that uses retail to connect people to their impact. And we use our physical space to host deeper dives into those impact areas. I also consult with businesses and nonprofits about shifting their impact from performative to meaningful impact that they can clearly articulate to their customers.
I'm Lizzy Lee. I'm the founder of Shop Sidewalk. Sidewalk is an e-commerce marketplace designed to help empower people to shop local and save local businesses. I'm passionate about community, so Sidewalk is all about building stronger connections between neighbors and the places that we live. I started and built my career in banking at JP Morgan in New York with a firsthand view of the financial crisis and its aftermath. I'm also a consultant and business owner in the real estate industry here in Denver, where I help clients with complex financing for infrastructure development projects. You're also going to hear from a couple of special guests during this presentation, including the amazing Lauren Hebert, who you'll catch a clip of in just a minute.
So now that you know who we are, let's talk about where we're headed during today's session. So in the startup world, it's all about move fast and break things. And sometimes it's called for in order to move things forward. But shattering a paradigm, whether it's a cultural norm, an economic system, or a dominant business model, can sometimes cause unintended consequences that our future selves will have to be accountable for. In other words, sometimes the things that we break are not always the things we originally intended to. So we thought, wouldn't it be better to plan and mitigate for those negative consequences long before they hurt people or make the news cycle? So that's what this session is all about. But to understand the source of unintended consequences, we need to learn a bit about complex systems. What is a complex system? Well, our colleague Lauren, who is an expert in complex systems, will answer that question for us.
Hey friends, Lauren Hebert here, and I am going to help you understand what a complex system is. So I think the best way to dig into this is to think of a city, like the city of Denver. It's a constantly changing network of ideas, infrastructure, vehicles, people, bacteria, virus, money, businesses, and so on. We could literally expand on this list all day, but since I only have a minute, let's just call each of the things in the network components. In a city, there's no central control of the components, right? There's no single puppet master who's running the whole show. And when a huge variety of components, like the ones we just listed, interact with one another with no central control or single purpose, complex and totally unexpected collective behavior can emerge. We see this every day. Think about like traffic patterns or the unique culture of a particular city. So, when we say complex system, what we mean is just a network of components that's never static, but always shifting and adapting. And the possible number of components in the network is pretty much incalculable. And as a whole, it produces really hard to predict, unexpected, and sometimes really, really weird behavior. So here's the thing, our businesses are born and grow and die in complex systems. So it's just absolutely insane that we don't know more about how they work. Healthcare, banking, retail, all are wildly complex systems. So to understand the complex systems we're working in, we've got to look at things from a systems point of view. So what this perspective does is it lifts us up so we can see things holistically, see how they work broadly. It lengthens our view so that we can see a little bit farther out into the future. But let's get something right out in the open right now. Systems thinking will not make you psychic. You will not be able to predict the future, but it will make your guesses about the future much better because it'll allow you to see many more of the factors that influence the system. So you can build better, more strategic models of the system you're working in. Okay, that's it for me. Go forth and think in systems.
I mean, she's amazing, and we have learned a lot. So enough abstraction. Let's look at a few examples. Oh, Toms. So we all make a lot of assumptions, and I am going to make one now. Considering the title of this talk, I would wager money that at least one of you is wearing a pair of Toms right now. So I fell in love with Toms too. When I first heard Blake speak at South by Southwest, I had won a scholarship to attend based on a paper that I wrote about leveraging tech for good. I'm a social worker. He is leveraging the power of buying, of the consumer who gives a shit. We're all doing something good, right? Well, the hard truth is no. Tom's has been my go-to cautionary tale to anyone who is in the social enterprise space or with a startup that wants to solve a big problem. Let's just cut right to the chase. Tom's is not a good company, both in its intention nor in its execution. So, we have a white guy, lovely, nice white guy, who decided that Black kids needed shoes because he reasoned, how can anyone get anywhere in the world without shoes? So this requires us to believe two things. One, that the hardships that these poor kids were facing was due to a lack of shoes. And two, that giving them shoes was the best way to address those problems. And neither of those, unfortunately, is true. So this was a fix that fails. And this is a causal loop, a fancy systems diagram that illustrates what we're talking about. So Tom's found a problem, implemented their idea of a fix, which at first seemed to address the problem, but over time created unintended consequences that fed back to, we're in downtown Denver, so we might have a little background noise, we apologize. So over time, that fed to make the problem worse. So researchers actually went in and tried to determine the results of Tom's, and they were unable to find a way in which the shoes had much of an impact on poor kids' lives. The kids liked the shoes, but there was no significant improvement in school attendance or self-esteem. In addition, the stream of free shoes made poverty worse. It decimated the local shoemaking industry, and it created an imbalance of power, which corrupted local leaders. And it also had a tremendous environmental impact. There are literally piles of shoes, of Tom's shoes, all over the developing world. So on the business end, this giving model was highly unprofitable, and the company nearly went bankrupt. So to underscore the point here, when we assume we can solve a problem for a community, if we don't understand that complex system, and we don't understand that community, we are going to do harm. So there's a problem, we implement a fix, but the long-term unintended consequences of the fix feed back into that to make the problem worse. So now on the flip side, Colorado, we love our Patagonia. So their founders set out to build an uncompany, one whose principal concern was taking care of employees, customers, and above all else, the planet, which is, not a classic business model, but Patagonia does roughly $1 billion in sales each year, and it has 3,000 employees across the world. So Dean Carter, the head of HR, said, we're not looking for a culture fit when they are hiring. They're looking for a culture add. So they encourage employees to volunteer, and Patagonia supports employees with tailored childcare for their diverse workforce since before it was cool. And the result is that 100% of new moms return to work at Patagonia. So when President Trump, and some of you may have heard of this, he called for the shrinking of our national monuments, like Bears Ears in Utah. And this would have been the largest reduction of protected land in US history, which is what led Patagonia to change its homepage to a stark message: the president stole your land. They are not perfect, but Patagonia acknowledges that they are part of the garment industry, which has a huge ecological impact, and it has a huge problem. So their fix, the products come with a lifetime guarantee, and Patagonia encourages customers to repair old items rather than replace them. And something I actually was not aware of, they have the largest clothing repair facility in North America, and a truck that travels the United States repairing clothing, whether it was made by Patagonia or not. So every time Patagonia leans into its values, the company seems to thrive. And Dean shared a quote from the founder, Yvonne Chouinard: "Every time we've elected to do the right thing, it turned out to be more profitable." So, okay, we've talked about two companies in the apparel industry. Now let's talk about two that are digital social platforms. We're going to talk about Facebook and Nextdoor. So Facebook, we all know of Facebook's evils, especially in the last week, but in the early days, Facebook was connecting the world. It was doing good in the world. It was driving revenue, and it had already launched Mark Zuckerberg into stratospheric fame. So people were spread across the globe, missing out on these little interactions that create a deep sense of meaning. And they were feeling disconnected. So Facebook swooped in to solve this problem. And now grandma can see her granddaughter's first smile, and two people who have never met in person can meet online and eventually get married. So I bet then, Zuck did not imagine that just a few years after Facebook's IPO, he would go from hero to villain. And the reality is, over time, Facebook's business model and monetization strategy subtly enabled the darker side of human nature. So those strategic decisions contributed to cyberbullying, mental illness, political polarization, and deep mistrust, which makes friends and family feel disconnected from one another, worsening the very problem that Facebook was originally trying to solve. So this is another fix that fails. But the story gets worse. Facebook realized that people were feeling more disconnected when they used the app. So they implemented a meaningful social interactions metric, an algorithm called MSI, which prioritizes posts from friends, posts that seem to have been carefully written, the longer posts, and posts that get more comments over paid content. But this tends to increase the visibility of inflammatory, outrage-spreading rants from people we know, which, you guessed it, ultimately makes people feel more disconnected and more depressed. Another fix that fails on top of a fix that fails. And just on a tangent, I want to note here that I am a Facebook user for my business primarily. And with that 6-hour shutdown of Facebook and Instagram this week, I found myself terrified that the ripple effects of this could impact my ability to reach my customers. And what would that mean for what was already an imbalanced algorithm? So we acknowledge that we're all hooked on Facebook, and we know it's harming us and others. So now we're going to talk about Nextdoor. And let's be clear, not all social networks ignore their unintended consequences like Facebook does. Nextdoor has tried hard to learn from the Facebook fails. So I'm going to tell you a personal story. In 2019, I was asked to bring some small business owners together to meet Sarah Fryer, the current CEO of Nextdoor, and she is also the former CFO of Square. And I'll be honest, I was like, this will be hilarious, and I am going to hate her so much. I mean, Nextdoor is an actual dumpster fire. So what could she possibly say? But it was also a very unique opportunity to meet someone and be in the room with someone who was so wildly successful. So I made sure to invite women of color, whom I knew would have no problem getting real about Nextdoor's reputation for the most racist comments ever. And at the time, I myself had stopped using the app when I saw a person here in Denver make a post about pouring their scalding hot coffee over their fence onto a homeless person who was urinating in the alley. And then all of the neighbors got involved and started talking about how they were going to turn the hoses on them as well. And this was in the winter. So then I met her, and she was nothing like I expected her to be, and nothing like the idea I had of a tech leader. She grew up in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. She did not shy away from talking about the staggering levels of rampant racist profiling and anti-homeless posts in Denver specifically. She was open to feedback from the Black women business owners. She was very disappointed that we were not aware of any resources that they were providing for small business owners. And she spoke with true hopefulness about the tech that they were experimenting with to mitigate the harmful behaviors that people displayed on the platform. And so I reached out to her for some insight for this workshop, and she gave us some great resources and gave us a little content that we are going to share with you right now. So this is Sarah Fryer speaking to how they are proactively addressing trust and safety on their platform.
Is our company around pillars: member experience, business solutions, but importantly, we have a neighborhood vitality pillar. That neighborhood vitality team focuses on things like the tone of the conversation on the platform, moderation, trust and safety, and not just always how to prevent the bad, but frankly, how do we norm for the positive? Things like, how do we create great group connections? How do we augment the reps on our platform who want to help invite new neighbors or maybe boost a local business? And also part of that is a community team. Our community team is out there in the day-to-day, meeting people in real life, bringing those learnings back into the platform as we build, but also helping train and educate everyone who's on Nextdoor. In fact, we just launched some really interesting anti-bias training. Third and finally, it's about having a strong purpose and vision so that everyone at the company knows what is the North Star when they need to make a decision. So our purpose is to cultivate a kinder world where everyone has a neighborhood to rely on. We're seeing it right now as a lot of the US is going through a huge winter storm, and we've seen it globally in all 11 countries that we're in as people have survived and hopefully thrived during the pandemic. Beyond the purpose, there's also then just what is our mission? And our mission is around being this trusted hub for trusted connections and the exchange of helpful information, goods, and services. I like to word it as the purpose will last forever. In 1,000 years, people will still show up to Nextdoor to cultivate that kinder world. The mission should get accomplished, and then we'll continue to do more. But it is important that employees and everyone around us knows what our North Star is when we make decisions. So trust and safety is our #1 priority at Nextdoor. We're dedicated to building a stronger, safer, and kinder world where everyone feels welcome online and where we hope they take those online connections out into the real world. And we look forward to welcoming many of you, hopefully all of you, onto the Nextdoor platform this year. Thanks so much.
So what we see here is that when she came on as CEO, she acknowledged what was not working right from the jump, and she immediately put things into place to react to the problem. And I love the concept she mentioned of norming for the positive. That is not something we tend to hear. And they are facing these systemic challenges head on, and the jury is still out. but we are fascinated to see if they're able to turn the Titanic around.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Erika. Those are really fascinating examples and super thought-provoking, especially as you mentioned with everything that's happened with Facebook this week. It's really on display for the world to talk about. So I'm going to cover a few more examples of complex system failures using a different theme and another company we love to talk about, Amazon. So first, let's talk the system. The example I'm going to use is called Tragedy of the Commons. So reach back into your pre-COVID memory and imagine, if you can, an office kitchen. Now zoom into the sink. Throughout the day, clean coffee mugs get used, abandoned, and unwashed cups quickly pile up. So when your coworker, let's call her Emily, heads to the kitchen for afternoon tea, she finds there isn't a single cup left, and she ends up washing the whole pile of dishes. It really doesn't seem fair that a mess made by everybody should be cleaned up by the responsible or obsessively tidy coworker who feels compelled to deal with it. But this is often what happens. This is a systems pattern called Tragedy of the Commons, where each person uses a small portion of a scarce resource, like clean dishes. But because everybody is using some too, the resource quickly gets depleted. So Tragedy of the Commons is the dynamic that's driving many of our global problems, including climate change. And it's what each of us are actually collaborating with Amazon to do every time we push that Prime Buy Now button. Those cheap Prime orders come with a huge carbon cost and a huge human cost. With 197 million customers every month, Amazon shoppers are collectively causing tremendous environmental harm and are destroying local independent business ecosystems that make up the backbone of our communities. Scale can create tragedy of the commons. So where did Amazon go wrong as they scaled? It wasn't, necessarily a problem, or the problem may have been isolated to the book industry when they first started out, but as they started to grow, it got bigger and bigger. So diving a little deeper, Amazon centered their business and success metrics really early on the idea of a customer obsession. So you'd think this would assume they're putting people first, right? Not necessarily. They're putting the customer first. That is, humans solely in the context of their purchasing power and not in their context of their role as a product user, mother, employee, neighbor, community member, or small business owner. They're famous for turning a blind eye to products sold on their site that are flat out unsafe and harm the customer that they're so passionate about. They sacrifice the well-being of their employees and contractors to get products to the customer faster. They collect data on all of us to create a feedback loop that drives us to continuous consumership without our consent necessarily, even if the products are things we weren't looking for or didn't even know that we needed. They skirted safety regulations around the shipping industry that have caused real harm. Now, they do a great job around PR for their contributions. We've all heard of Amazon Smile, and Jeff Bezos personally donated $10 billion, personally and publicly donated $10 billion to climate change in early 2020. It was the largest private donation ever, but it's really important to highlight that that is actually $3 billion less than what Amazon spent on shipping costs alone in just the fourth quarter of 2019. So the fundamental issue here is how they define the metric customer and how they define their system around the customer. Amazon has measured their relative success based on this narrow view of who they're serving and when. And they get away with a lot of things that are not great for us collectively while crusading under the flag of customer obsession. So how do we address a system like this? So there's actually a pretty simple fix. Let's go back to the office kitchen. What if we had a meter that measured the cost of each dirty dish that you left on the side of the sink? And that meter was based on the effort of the person stuck washing it. And it actually charged you for money for their time. you would probably start washing your own dishes. Researchers have learned that we use less water and electricity when we get real-time data from meters in our homes. So what we need to do to stop things like the tragedy of the commons is immediate feedback from that complex system to help us understand the impact that we're having. What if Amazon showed the true impact of your cheap Prime purchase using an easy to read dashboard that captured the real environmental impact, the cost of warehousing, the packaging, the shipping, the delivery, and so on? If that feedback helped each of us make different shipping decisions, it could reduce our collective carbon impact significantly. Of course, the reality is that Amazon knew that overconsuming and underpaying would create costs for someone. They just hoped it wouldn't be them. But eventually they, and all of us, will have to pay those bills. Climate change is really expensive. Now, Amazon does do some good things, but we have to ask, is it worth the bad? We're at an inflection point as a society where we have to decide what kind of world we want to live in. What do we want our main streets to look like? What do we want our world to look like? Tragedy of the Commons really helped highlight how each of us, our seemingly small decisions, not only as entrepreneurs, but also as consumers, really add up. So how does my company Sidewalk fit in here? Sidewalk is a project I started in the spring of 2020 when COVID shut down the world around us. I was looking for a way to avoid shopping on Amazon, even though stores around me were closed. This was a near impossible task. So in comes the idea of, what if we had a local Amazon? Sidewalk is just that. It's a geographically based e-commerce marketplace designed to help customers browse through and shop at their local small businesses online. Again, think Amazon, but instead of an unknown seller across the country, you're buying from a store down the street from you, like Hope Tank. Sidewalk is an attempt to solve the same problem as Amazon, customer convenience, but we're going about it a really different way and taking into account the customer as a member of the broader community. Instead of replacing local business ecosystems, we're augmenting them. We're directing customer orders for simple items like books or shoelaces to existing small businesses inside your community. This eliminates the need for a cardboard box, big shipping trucks zipping around residential neighborhoods. It strengthens community by encouraging people, not just as customers, to get to know their local businesses, like Erika. We have all seen those struggling main streets with vacant storefronts. So fun fact, did you know that for every dollar you spend at a local business, 43 cents stays in your local economy? If you take that same dollar and spend it on Amazon, I'm gonna wager, about 4 cents stays local. So that 43 cents is huge. It means jobs, it means living wage and livelihoods, not for people across the country, for people in your neighborhoods. It's important to call out here that local retail was really struggling before COVID, and COVID really has done nothing but accelerate that decline. So Erika's retail business here in Denver, Hope Tank, has seen foot traffic reduced by about 50% even today after reopening. If we're going to commit to our community and our local business owners, we really need technology tools out there that make it easy to do so, and Sidewalk hopes to achieve exactly that. So, what happens when we don't anticipate or address the unintended consequences? What if we do nothing? The often result is when businesses and startups and disruptive inventors don't step up, governments step in with intense regulatory scrutiny. I know from personal experience working in finance during the financial crisis. There is no escaping it. And Airbnb is actually a really good example of this. Airbnb set out to make travel and housing affordable. Going back to that fix that fails example, short-term rental of extra space in your home worked really great at first until it worked too well. We've seen in the last few years a tidal wave of landlords switching their properties from long-term to short-term rentals, which has a huge impact on, you guessed it, affordable long-term housing. Many governments have stepped in here, including the city of Denver, Washington, D.C., and other large cities across the country, to limit Airbnb rentals in their market. So what does that mean for Airbnb? It means their growth track is essentially capped. And that's not a good sign for their business long term. So now what? Okay, so we've explored 2 examples of what complex systems look like, fixes that fail, tragedy that commons. There's many, many more pre-existing systems maps like this that you can use to start to evaluate types of fixes and system solutions. And we'll provide those resources at the end of the presentation. But don't lose hope here. This stuff is hard, but definitely not impossible. Creating a plan to address the unintended consequences is certainly not a prerequisite for starting your business, but absolutely can be done before you scale to prevent harm. Again, right, you think of all these businesses, Airbnb, Amazon, Facebook, when they were operating at a really small scale, you didn't see these catastrophic breakages in society. This really happens as you're beginning to scale. So if you're scaling, this next part is for you. And we're going to talk about 4 really simple ways to get started. So first, build a strategy map to track key indicators. So those little diagrams that we've been showing throughout this presentation, there's actually exercises that you can go through to build those for the ecosystem that you're working in. So we need to develop better models and metrics so we can make better decisions. When we can account for the way that a system works, we can address root causes rather than systems. Or if we're going to solve for symptoms, we can be intentional about it and we can anticipate and avoid unintended consequences. That means we can make decisions that are better for the world and for our businesses. So setting up indicators to track and measure your impact is important, but your definition of those measures is really critical as well. So take Facebook and Amazon, for example. Facebook used a metric, meaningful social impact, but let's be real, what is meaningful? How did they define meaningful? And how did that lead them astray? Same thing for Amazon, customer success. What is a customer? And is that enough? Is it too narrow or too broad? It's really questions that you need to ask yourself as you're building these metrics. So the next slide has a picture of the system. Again, it's scary. Don't let it scare you. This can get complex, but it's so helpful for teasing out issues that may not be obvious to see at first. Again, we'll provide more resources at the end. So step 2, bring a diverse perspective to the table, many diverse perspectives. Gather key stakeholders. You need to get viewpoints from every place in the system that you're operating in. Amazon is really famous for having the empty chair representing the customer's voice in every meeting. In hindsight, we can see clearly that Amazon has impact way beyond the customer. They really should have had 100 empty chairs. Now, don't let this overwhelm you. Let's be real, it's super, super hard to bring every perspective into every meeting. And if you did, you'd probably never make any steps forward. But we recommend setting up regular checkpoints to create discipline around that thought process. Many of you are familiar with the book, The Lean Startup, and that methodology. In that, they have a suggestion of setting up quarterly pivot or persevere checkpoints. We're suggesting a similar thing for stakeholder checkpoints. So make your stakeholder evaluation meetings on a regular schedule and don't skip them. Don't do it once and leave the assessment behind. Integrate the stakeholder evaluations into your schedule, and as your business changes, so too will your impact on stakeholders. Check your board. Does it represent the community that you serve? Make these small incremental steps forward as you begin to grow. User warning, stakeholder engagement is hard. Put on your thick skin and check your ego at the door. Listen. You may not like what they have to say, but that input may save you from worsening the very problem that you set out to fix. So step 3, partner with governments. Let's face it, governments are not always easy to work with. However, looking at the amount of investment that Facebook, Amazon, and Airbnb put into government lobbying now, it should be an indicator of how important this is for every business, especially disruptors. What we want to highlight here is don't wait till it's too late. Governments ideally are representative of the communities that you're serving. So it really helps with the stakeholder question and making sure you've got representative voices at the table. Governments can actually help. They often have grants. Sidewalk has received government grants. They can help with publicity. They can provide economic development resources. And government engagement can be one of the earliest indicators of unintended consequences. They have, if you start getting phone calls from local government representatives or community organizations, like that should be a red flag that you're starting to trip wires in society that are causing disruption. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do that. It just means you should check and make sure you're tripping the wires that you actually want to be tripping. Because if you're not, there is no do nothing scenario. They can and they will get involved in businesses that disrupt the social norm and create harm. So again, our suggestion is get ahead of it before it's too late. Get comfortable talking to local governments that you're working with or in the sector that you're working with. If you're a broad online-based technology company, call your local town council in the community that you live in and check in. Just one takeaway to do after this presentation, pick a local government official, a legislative rep, your member of Congress if you want to go big, email them, introduce yourself, really start to invite them into the conversation about what you're doing early on because they may just be really helpful and more helpful than you think. So lastly, don't just compete to win, compete to win-win. We're likely all here in the growth track because we're competitive people. We like winning, we're willing to take risks, but we're also curious, smart, and engaged. We're all in this session, right? We're not asking you to be a saint or to be perfectly predict the future, but we're encouraging you to try your best and explore and map out the system. If by doing that, you can look for warning signs that your scaling is causing harm. But most importantly, we're asking you to win, not just for yourself, your investors, and your team, but all of the people who you have an impact on. And we want you to celebrate those win-wins. Government can't fix all these things, and oftentimes they come in with fixes that are not efficient or not the best solution. But you have the opportunity to develop a market-based solution. So not only that, but if you see somebody else out there who is creating a mess through their technology or their business, come up with a solution. Screw ups create opportunity. So that concludes the first segment of our presentation. We're going to open up for questions. But before I do that, I'm going to leave you all with one final question here. So everything we participate in has unintended consequences. It's just a fact of life. So I encourage you just to think about, why is Amazon sponsoring Denver Startup Week? We all know that Amazon has problems with government and impending regulation. We all know Amazon has a PR problem with communities. We're asking this question honestly and openly to create a dialogue around this, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to post in the chat or message us, but why do you think they are supporting Denver Startup Week? And more importantly, what are they getting out of this? So again, we're open for questions. We have Erika here and the amazing Lauren Hebert, who you saw earlier in the presentation live as well. So
Check it out.
let's check out the chat. So we've got some commentary on Nextdoor. Is Tom's different from Tom's of Maine?
Yes, Tom's shoes, or are we asking in their model? I will say I'm not familiar with Tom's of Maine as far as like the business model here.
A natural, they produce like natural organic products.
I mean, here's what I will say.
It's different. To answer the question.
I mean, yes, they're different, but a lot of businesses have really used Tom's as like a model to model their business with. And, you know, one of the things that is funny is I get the reputation of kind of stirring things up just by asking questions. And I think, you know, a lot of what we want to talk about and you to leave with is really just like asking yourself some of those questions that can be, you know, a bit uncomfortable, might reveal some places you need to really revisit. But it's really about doing research. And if it feels like too good, it generally is. And, you know, what we were talking about prior to this was, you know, Tom's doubled down. So instead of having a little bit of awareness of like, hey, we really need to like change this. We've done some really bad things. They doubled down and they added product and they really got in there. And now there's like glasses and all these things. And quite frankly, as you know, we're all startup people, he's no longer in charge of his company. So, you know, it's something to think about as well. So what else? Let's see. Yeah, Nextdoor. I mean, again, we are hardly, you know, promoting Nextdoor.
Yeah.
This is really just a sort of interesting part of the story that I only knew because I was in proximity to Sarah Fryer. I had no idea they were trying to do anything. I mean, I just thought it was the dumpster fire that we all avoid.
Yeah, and you know, like there's some aspect of humanity here that you just have to kind of accept that. I don't know if anybody listening to this has ever been to a school board meeting or has, you know, city council meetings. I'm sure people out there have watched SNL skits of them happening. It's just, we as communities, we have a lot of personality and it comes out. And I think really the danger with Facebook was, I think Erika mentioned this, that just you could be blind, right? Like you can be posting from halfway around the world, like really, really harmful things. And Facebook has really had a really hard time monitoring that and monitoring the harm that it creates for people.
Yeah. So a question I see in the chat that I get at least once a week. Social enterprise, I myself do not count Hope Tank as a social enterprise. That is a really specific term that implies a lot of things. I consider what I do as a business for good, and it's something that I'm trying to show people is very easy actually to infuse in your business. It's not about percentage models. It's really about the foundations of what your business is about and how you articulate that. So, you know, I am always cautionary around like, you know, 1% to the planet or things like this, and really looking at like, especially in the small business space or startup space where you don't have a lot of cash, a donation-based model, a percentage model is not probably very effective in your community. So I learned that early on with Hope Tank. I started with a percentage model and I was writing a check for, you know, $3.47, this is true, to the Wild Animal Sanctuary. And I, as a social worker, went, what am I like, what is this gonna do? And so I really had that moment of like, what are the resources I have as a business that I'm ignoring? And that's what we all have. So for some of us, it's a sphere of influence. Like a lot of times I'm saying, don't, you know, it's not about writing a check. It's that you might have somebody in your sphere of influence who can like actually make a big dent. And that you need to think more creatively with your business about what that looks like. Is it like what Patagonia has done around, activism is not generally really like that extreme. It's like just doing good by other humans. So talking about, fair wages and all of these things is really not radical. It's like just doing good by others. So,
I think this question, again, the question is, what is your advice for people looking to get into social entrepreneurship to resolve an issue, but don't know where to start? I'm going to punt this to Lauren, because I think this is exactly what we've been talking about in this systems map, that create a map around the issue. Lauren, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say. I think, Sean, you should start by making sure you deeply understand that issue, the context in which the issue exists. And if you have a solution idea and you're looking for some folks to run it past, that's why there are people in the community like Erika, myself, and Lizzy. So you can, we have our contact information on our resource slide. We'll get that to you, and you're welcome to give us a shout, and we'll listen. But more importantly, you need to run that solution by the people who are in that community. Once you really have a sense that you understand the issue deeply, you should also know who those stakeholders are. So bring it to the stakeholders and talk to them and get directly into the community and engage with them, and ask them for feedback, and then actually take it, which is the hardest part. The hardest part is really hearing what they have to say and changing your baby that you put all kinds of time and love into, to make it really work for the stakeholder. So those are my suggestions. Anything else, you two?
No, I would just say, like, they don't underestimate the power of actually creating that map. I'm a finance person, so I love numbers and equations, and that's really what that map is there for, is to break down and distill these really complex issues into positive impacts, negative impacts. Okay, what happens if Tom gives a pair of shoes? Like, who does that benefit? Who does that hurt, right? So really taking a look at that angle from every small action from all sides before you actually take the step.
Yeah. And one of the resources that I always tell people, especially around like the Toms thing, because I know that can feel really like icky, is there's a film called Poverty Inc. that really changed my understanding, and also why I don't do international impact-based products anymore, unless it is like a business here that is that person from that country, because the ripple effect of how that money flows from America to another country is like not what we think. And that stakeholder part is critical, because it's often, I've already heard it here at Startup Week, is like, when I make money, I'll go do the impact stuff. And what all three of us are really about is like, no, you can actually build that in no matter what stage you're in your business trajectory, is that you don't have to have any dollars moving to actually have value driven systems. So it's, it's not something that should be an afterthought. It's something that should be like right now. And these are all, there are like lots and lots more examples that we could have gone into of businesses that seemed amazing. Like right now in Denver, the scooters, like every day there's another horrific article, about this. And so
I use scooters all the time.
You wear a helmet?
No, when I have scars on my arm to prove it.
Oh my God, there's legitimately an article today about this. So, really it's, a lot of it is ego. Let's be real. Like, we all want to be known for something innovative and something different. And like, my business is not that complicated. It's like really simple, and anyone can replicate and do another version of it. But, my fixation is with those systems, is when I invest in a Black or Brown or Indigenous owned small business, that has real measured impact that I can track. And I like tracking that, and really also understanding people's motivations. which is what prompted us to even really do this panel, you know.
I'll give Sidewalk as another example, is like, look at how, again, you can augment the systems around you with your solution, right? I said, I want to shop local, right? So how can we create this precision technology to go in and almost, surgically insert it in places that will actually augment small businesses and not replace what they're already doing. It'll actually make their lives easier. And again, like we said, compete to win-win. So it takes a lot of thought. It really takes a lot of work. So it's doable.
Stuff that, that you learned, that I, again, have the social worker lens, which was that you might have this idea that's tech-based, and then you go in to help businesses that don't even have the tech to deal with the tech that you're bringing in. And so the assumptions you make about these communities when you want to help, you might be solving the wrong problem, which then creates problems for you, down the road that you then have to adjust for.
So the next question, can you share any resources or templates to help develop strategy maps? Not sure to where to even start. Lauren, can you pop that slide up? Lauren's our amazing presentation master. Can you pop that slide up, and so that people can take a screenshot? We encourage everybody to take a screenshot, like do a screen grab. These are some really great places to start. Lauren, do you want to talk through the first two?
Sure. So for folks who maybe are in the middle of ventures or have had a successful venture in the past and aren't sure where you're headed yet, next, XGenesis is an amazing accelerator, pre-accelerator for folks who want to start a new venture in a complex system. So highly recommend checking that out if you are kind of in that place where you're in the middle of two ventures or are just ready for the next thing. Systems thinking, the second bullet point, we have two resources specifically on systems thinking. And so Rachel, this will help you out as you try to get your map started. So first, to get all the concepts down, I recommend a book, Thinking in Systems, by the fabulous, amazing Donella Meadows, who is really the translator of systems thinking out of the academic space and into the real world. And then a blog, The Systems Thinker, and there are lots of contributors to the blog, and the URL that's listed here is an introduction to systems thinking. So it's just giving you the basic concepts. But here's the thing, Rachel, you do not have to be a systems expert to start your map. Grab some crayons, grab some construction paper, and go at it like a kindergartner, and just start to sketch it out the way that you think it works. And then test the assumptions that you've put down on the paper by getting out and doing some research, whether that means field work in the real world, or get online and dig in and really try to find out, are the dynamics happening in the system actually the dynamics I've put down on this paper, or are people's lived experiences totally different than what I think they might be? So those are a couple of resources to get you started. If you want to get really, really deep into a systems map and you want some help with that, you're welcome to contact me. My email address is at the bottom, along with Lizzy's and Erika's. And then I'll hand it back over to you two to talk about the online resources.
Well, so this was actually what Sarah Fryer sent me. And I have to say my jaw was a little on the ground. It's really interesting. Definitely block out some time. And I will say again, like, I'm 10 years into business. I'm just learning these things in concrete ways. I just sort of always did it, by my gut. And so it's really nice to have these structures in place. So that's what it is. Like, literally just go to the website, start messing around. And it does break it into two different stages of business, and you can do an assessment. Yeah.
And we're not talking about like things like traffic safety. This really digs into like safety around technology. It goes into asking you questions about, what are the ages of your users? It really is really good for prompting different trains of thought and giving you ideas you might not have thought of before.
Yeah. And then just if you follow us, I mean, we're on this journey. And we were all brought together through different projects. And so, I always encourage people to like follow interesting people who are doing things that are even out of your scope. Like I applied to South by Southwest. I am not a tech person, but that doesn't mean we don't intersect with those fields. So, I really try to stay current with who the people are saying important things. Not to say we're the people.
I was going to say, don't give them the wrong idea, Erika. This is, I want to mention, I saw one more question about ESG ratings and for social impact. And I just wanted to mention, I have not specifically used them, but I know that they do have some really interesting metrics around relationships, looking at how you're impacting employees and community members. So I think whatever rating system or metrics system you want to use, go for it. But think about it. Don't take a page out of a workbook or someone else's set of metrics and apply it to your growing startup, and imagine that those are going to give you a real picture of what's happening. They have to be really values oriented and meaningful metrics for your company in your system. So I think ESG is probably great. I know they have some great things around relationships. Haven't used them personally, but just make sure you do customize them.
All right. I think that's it for us. I think our time is up.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining, everybody. This has really been a pleasure. Again, reach out. We're here. We're happy to help.